North Korean leader Kim Jong-un spent more than 4 hours with the South Korean envoys when they met for talks over a dinner held on Monday at the headquarters of North Korea's ruling Workers' Party in Pyongyang. Now, this meeting comes amid the latest diplomatic efforts by the South Korean government as it hopes to pave the way for direct talks between the U.S. and North Korea. So are things finally looking up for the two Koreas and for talks between North Korea and the international community, including the U.S.? Before we try to find answers to that, let's first go over to our Devin Whiting at the News Center for the latest headlines at this hour. Devin, take us away.
Sure, Jiyoon. About that meeting yesterday, still short on specifics about what was discussed, but we're now getting the first official impressions from both South and North Korea about how it went. In South Korea, an official at the presidential office said today that the meeting was not disappointing. The official said it's understood that an agreement was reached between the two sides concerning an inter-Korean summit, the details of which the South Korean delegates will announce this evening when they return to Seoul. North Korea's state media reported that leader Kim Jong-un held an open-hearted talk with the South Korean officials and called the agreement they reached satisfactory. The North's official news agency also said Kim Jong-un expressed a desire to write a new history of national reunification. A key aim of the South Koreans was to impress upon the North the need to start dialogue with the U.S. on ending its nuclear program, but no word yet on how the North Koreans responded to that appeal. For its part, the United States says it's cautiously optimistic about the South Korean delegates' visit to Pyongyang. Pentagon spokesman Colonel Robert Manning told reporters on Monday that the Trump administration encourages talks between the two Koreas. The trip has also been welcomed by China. Beijing's foreign ministry said the Chinese government is looking forward to the meeting having a positive outcome and eventually laying the groundwork for talks between Washington and Pyongyang. U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to sign off on new tariffs on steel and aluminum this week, though exactly when isn't yet clear. Those tariffs are expected to deal a blow to South Korea and other U.S. allies. In the meantime, the WTO has joined those voices urging President Trump to change his mind. Lee Seung-jae reports.
With fears rising over the possibility of a full-scale tariff war, the head of the World Trade Organization is urging U.S. President Donald Trump to reverse course over his decision to slap hefty tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. Speaking at a WTO meeting in Geneva on Monday, Roberto Azevedo said Trump's proposal would trigger a domino effect that could lead to a global recession, adding there's a much higher and a real risk of triggering an escalation of trade barriers around the world. Despite the grim warnings, President Trump has rejected the idea that his measures, which he says are a way of defending U.S. national security, would lead to a trade war, even though his announcement prompted threats of retaliation from around the world. They include the EU, which is threatening to impose equally heavy import taxes on American goods. According to the EU Commissioner for Trade, Brussels could apply a 25% tariff on around $3.5 billion of imports from the U.S., targeting iconic U.S. exports, including Levi's jeans, Harley-Davidson motorbikes, and bourbon whiskey. Brazil, Mexico, and Japan have also said they will consider retaliatory steps if President Trump presses ahead with his plans. Concerns are growing as the world waits to see if and when the first domino falls and what effect it could have. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Consumer prices in Korea climbed 1.4% last month. That's quite a bit more than last February. Data show it was mainly due to higher farm and fisheries prices caused by a cold snap and more expensive lodging. Kim Ji-yeon has this report.
Consumer price increases in Korea were in the 1% range for the fifth straight month in February. Statistics Korea says its consumer price index jumped 1.4% compared to the same period last year, a faster rate of increase than the 1% on-year gain recorded in January. The core inflation rate, which excludes volatile food and oil prices, was at 1.2% on year. Prices of food, drinks, and accommodation increased while communication prices dropped. In particular, prices of agricultural and fisheries products spiked due to a cold snap last month, climbing a whopping 3.5% on year, the biggest rate of increase in 5 months. Price rises in the services sector also pushed up consumer prices in February, climbing 1.7% compared to the same period last year, particularly those related to food and lodging. The consumer price index has been hovering near the government's target range of 2% between February and September last year, mainly due to higher petroleum prices and the low base effect due to a nationwide discount on electricity bills the previous year. But it fell into the 1% range since October last year as prices of vegetables stabilized before soaring last month. Kim Jong-un, Arirang News.
In other news, police are preparing to open a criminal investigation into one of Korea's leading liberal politicians, An Hee-jung, who's accused of raping his secretary. Until today, An was a provincial governor but resigned this morning. He was also a leading light in the Democratic Party. He ran for its presidential nomination in the last election and was seen by many as having a good shot at the presidency at some point down the road. As our Shin Se-min reports, the worldwide Me Too movement has entered Korean politics.
Another familiar public figure faces allegations of sexual misconduct. The governor of Chungcheongnam-do Province, An Hee-jung, has been accused of repeatedly sexually assaulting his secretary over the past 8 months. Appearing on local news media on Monday, the victim said she was raped on 4 occasions between June 2017 and February this year. The victim even said Governor An had raped her after discussing the Me Too movement, which spread to Korea after a female prosecutor came forward with her experiences in January. An's alleged victim said she will file a complaint with the prosecution Tuesday. Shortly after the allegations came to light, the leader of the ruling Democratic Party of Korea apologized on behalf of the party and said it would expel the governor following an emergency meeting of its party leaders. The 54-year-old Governor An, after insisting the sexual relations were consensual, later resigned and said he would stop all political activities. The rattling allegations of sexual misconduct are the first within the political sphere to be publicized since the Me Too movement hit Korea this year. And given that An was considered one of the main contenders for the Democratic Party's presidential nomination against the then frontrunner and now the current president Moon Jae-in, the allegations are raising eyebrows. An was one of the most prominent politicians in liberal circles, often being cited as the now ruling party's next leader or even a presidential candidate. The latest revelation comes after a raft of allegations of sexual misconduct in the entertainment, culture, education, and even religious circles. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
International pressure is growing on Russia and its ally, the Syrian government, to stop hostilities against the rebel-held area of eastern Ghouta. Efforts for a truce have so far come to nothing, and the bombardment there by pro-Syrian forces continues. Noadam reports.
French President Emmanuel Macron has urged his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin to ensure that Moscow's ally Syria implements a UN resolution calling for a 30-day ceasefire in eastern Ghouta. In Monday's phone call with Putin, Macron added that the UN truce should be accepted, quote, without any ambiguity. According to the Kremlin, Putin agreed on the importance of providing aid and evacuating civilians. Moscow had proposed a daily 5-hour truce instead of the UN resolution, but both proposals have not been met. The French leader's remark also came after Syrian President Bashar al-Assad vowed to push ahead with his military's assault on the rebel-held area to wipe out what he's described as terrorists. Dozens more civilians were killed Monday as a convoy with humanitarian aid entered eastern Ghouta amid continued bombardment by pro-regime forces. The shelling forced the UN convoy to cut short its mission and has now left the enclave. Aid officials said only 10 of more than 40 trucks managed to offload supplies to civilians. To make matters worse, the Syrian government was reported to have removed about 70% of goods, including medical kits, before the trucks entered the region. The move is being seen as efforts to stop rebels being treated. Syria's military and allied forces have now reclaimed about a third of eastern Ghouta in a bloody assault that has left more than 700 people dead. Noadam, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines for this hour.
So yesterday evening, Seoul's special envoys got to sit down with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un for dinner, the first such meeting since Kim took power in 2011. And how did this meeting go? North Korea has hailed it as open-hearted talks, while the South has said the meeting was not disappointing. Our Blue House correspondent Moon Gun-young has more.
The delegation of 5 officials led by Chung Eui-yong met with Kim Jong-un, chairman of the North Korean State Affairs Commission, on March 5th and had a dinner banquet together afterwards. The meeting and dinner banquet lasted 4 hours and 12 minutes, beginning at 6 p.m. Seoul time.
South Korea's presidential Blue House early Tuesday morning released the details of the first face-to-face between senior South Korean delegates and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un since he took power upon his father's death in late 2011. Noting the venue of the meeting/dinner at the headquarters of North Korea's powerful ruling Workers' Party, the Blue House said it marked the first time for any South Korean to be invited to the building. North Korea's state media reported that its leader held an open-hearted talk with the South Korean president's envoys, reaching a satisfactory agreement about holding an inter-Korean summit meeting with South Korean President Moon Jae-in. Seoul's Blue House also acknowledged an agreement reached between the two sides, adding the outcome of the meeting, which the special delegation will unveil upon return later this evening, were not disappointing. In a dispatch, the KCNA said Kim Jong-un expressed his desire to write a new history of national reunification during the welcome dinner, which was also attended by the North Korean leader's sister, Kim Yo-jung, who traveled to the South last month carrying her brother's summit invitation to President Moon and Kim's wife, Ri Sol-ju. Neither North Korea nor the South Blue House released the details of the talks or commented on how the North Kim responded to the South Korean appeal for Pyongyang to start a dialogue with Washington on ending the North nuclear weapons program. Despite the latest sign that the two Koreas are trying to mend ties after a year of repeated North Korean weapons tests and threats of nuclear war, there's considerable skepticism over the two Koreas' apparent warming ties. But each new development also raises the possibility that the two sides can use the momentum from the good feelings created during North Korea's participation in the South Pyeongchang Winter Olympics last month to ease a standoff over North Korea's nuclear ambitions and restart talks between Pyongyang and Washington. The 10-member delegation, which includes 2 ministerial-level officials from the South, will wrap up a 2-day trip to Pyongyang later this evening after another meeting with North Korean officials. Moon Gun-young, Arirang News, The Blue House.
And to tell us more about the South Korean envoys meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and what this may mean for inter-Korea relations as well as U.S.-North Korea relations, we're joined by Dr. Bong Young-sik, a researcher at the Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies. Welcome to the program.
Pleased to be here.
All right, so as widely expected, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met with South Korean envoys on Monday. Now, this was first such a meeting since Kim took power back in 2011, right?
Right. It was kind of a first coming out of the leader of North Korea, Mr. Kim Jong-un, since he seized the power in 2011. And it was expected because Mr. Kim Jong-un did everything in his power to make sure that North Korea would take every advantage of South Korea's hosting of the Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games by sending not only the orchestra and athletic delegations, but also cheering squad and his own sister as a special envoy. So it was expected that the Moon Jae-in government of South Korea would immediately send South Korea's own special envoy to reciprocate.
All right. Well, the South Korean officials have said that the talks with Kim Jong-un, quote unquote, were not disappointing. So what might have been agreed upon during this meeting between the two sides?
We have to, take the statement by the Blue House, the president's office, at its face value that the talks were not disappointing. So what does it mean by not disappointing? I believe that there are a lot of conditional agreements made by both sides. The elephant in the room is the United States,
right.
Not South Korea or North Korea, although this is a high-level inter-Korean talks, which means that any progress between the two Koreas is hinged upon progress on the matters related to North Korea's abandonment of its intercontinental missiles and nuclear weapons that can target the United States. So denuclearization of North Korea must be part of the future progress, not only in terms of the U.S.-North Korea talks, but also inter-Korean dialogue, including potential third summit meeting between Mr. Kim and President Moon Jae-in of South Korea.
Now, it seems that Kim Jong-un kind of differs from his father, Kim Jong-il, when it comes to diplomacy.
Right, it's a very different style. His father, the late Mr. Kim Jong-il, was known for his very reclusive style. He refused to, make himself available to the spotlight or the media coverage. But his son, Kim Jong-un, is very different, very open, and very aggressive style. As I said, that it was very different from his father's engagement of South Korea that he sent. Not only the huge delegation during the Winter Olympic Games, but also special envoy, which was his sister. But it is another matter whether his style will be more efficient than his father's, because the game, the North Korean nuclear crisis, on his watch is very different from the nuclear crisis during his father's time.
And now, what are the chances then of us seeing more continued exchanges like this one that we saw just now happening from here on out?
I would expect a very frequent, exchange of special envoys and other, human exchanges between the two Koreas, and the South Korea dispatching, government officials and diplomats to its security partners, such as the United States, Japan, as well as neighboring countries, China and Russia. It is because the nuclear crisis created by North Korea is so urgent, and there is a cloud of bad news looming above the heads, people living in Northeast Asia because of the reality of North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. So it is not it's not bad thing that these countries exchange special envoys to discuss their urgent matters. But at the same time, the exchange of personnel does not necessarily mean meaningful progress with regard to denuclearization of North Korea, or elimination of the source of major, military conflicts in Northeast Asia. I would say that the exchange of envoys would, give a sense of, progress. But in reality, special envoy dispatchment do not guarantee any progress.
Right.
It's like you are riding on a rocking chair. It may give you a sense of movement, but no progress in reality.
You're not really moving.
No.
Okay, well, now things are not really thawing between the U.S. and North Korea, like you said, because actually when the envoys were there, North Korea's Nodongshinmun published a commentary saying that President Trump used human rights as a pretense for military action against North Korea. And it also said that President Trump seems to be mentally unstable. Now, what can we make of this?
Well, what can we make of this? I would say that no North Korean therapist might have had a chance to examine the mentality or the mental health of the U.S. president. So I don't give it too much credit on the diagnosis rendered by North Korean media. In that editorial of the Nodong Shinbun also declare that the nuclear capability of North Korea is precious sword of justice. So basically, North Korea reiterates its standing position that nuclear weapons and intercontinental missiles are the best guarantor of the survival and security, as well as the independence of the republic from the threat of U.S. imperialism. So, although the same editorial praised the success of the, special envoy's visit to Pyongyang and the warm reception by the supreme leader of North Korea, it made it really clear that North Korea has no intention, at least at the official levels, to abandon or reduce its nuclear and missile capabilities, which is really negative news to the Moon Jae-in government, which tries to be an honest broker between Pyongyang and the United States.
So like you said, President Moon has been putting almost equal importance on inter-Korea relations as well as U.S.-North Korea relations. But with no apparent progress in U.S.-North Korea dialogue, there are concerns that if the two Koreas move too quickly to advance inter-Korea relations, doubts and concerns will only grow within the international community.
I regret that I have to agree with what you just said, that South Korea's credibility in the eyes of security partners, United States and Japan, will be reduced if Moon Jae-in government will be rushing into making progress only on the front of the inter-Korean dialogue and cooperation without properly addressing the concern of the United States and Japan about North Korea sticking to its nuclear weapons and intercontinental missiles. So I would say that Korea passing may not occur, but skipping Korea, I'm just using Mr. Donald Trump's own word, skipping Korea is going to happen.
All right. Well, I mean, you just mentioned about Japan, but how did China and Japan both, I guess, react to the latest envoy meeting in North Korea?
In principle, both countries support more dialogues. Who would say no to more dialogues with Pyongyang, right? If that is one of the options, possibly help solve the nuclear crisis created by North Korea without going with the new military options. But China has been conspicuously absent and quiet in all this crisis time. The Xi Jinping government declined to send high-ranked officials to Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games. We did not see either President Xi Jinping or Prime Minister Li Keqiang in either the opening ceremony or closing ceremony of the Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games. Basically, China dashed the hope of the Moon Jae-in government to take advantage of the Olympic Games to gather the leaders of the related parties to South Korea to discuss the nuclear issue of North Korea. So China is very different from China in 2003 when there was a second North Korean nuclear crisis. China almost volunteered to be the stakeholder to help solve the North Korean nuclear crisis and try to prevent United States, Bush administration, possibly taking military options to take away the threats inside North Korea by proposing the six-party talks. That was the beginning of the six-party talks, and China was the main host. But in the recent nuclear crisis, China has been unseen, totally absent. That means that China must have decided to outsource the problem to the United States because by remaining the sidelines of this crisis, China can avoid the retaliations on economic matters by the Trump administration of the United States and try to hand over the nuclear crisis, the big headache, to the United States. On the other hand, Japan has no other option but to support the United States policy of maximum pressure and maximum engagement because, like South Korea, Japan is already within the range of nuclear missile attacks from North Korea. Without North Korea succeeding in accomplishing the re-entry technology of the intercontinental missile.
Now, the envoys are actually scheduled to head to Washington again to debrief U.S. officials on their talks in North Korea. What can we expect from here?
Well, the special envoy going to the United States will do everything in their power to debrief what really had taken place between the leadership of North Korea and the special envoy of the Moon Jae-in government because trust and the credibility are extremely important for both South Korea and the United States to move together. At the same time maintain strategic flexibility in dealing with North Korea. But I doubt if Trump administration would support the Moon Jae-in government, if the Moon Jae-in government would say that we need to proceed first with inter-Korean dialogue, including the summit meeting between President Moon Jae-in and Mr. Kim Jong-un, in order to give another shot at North Korea to as a means to persuade Kim Jong-un to agree on direct negotiations with United States on the denuclearization.
Right.
I don't think Trump administration expectation would be so low. I would expect the Trump administration would only support Moon Jae-in government going for the Inter-Korean summit only after North Korea will make it clear that it will participate in a negotiation with the United States, premised upon North Korea's denuclearization.
Right, putting denuclearization on the agenda, right?
Right.
All right. Thank you so much for your insight today.
You're welcome.
And that does it for today, but we'll be back here tomorrow at the same time for more news updates, so don't forget to tune in then. Thanks for watching and see you soon.